you guys all here. See a lot of new faces. Just exciting.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
There you go. Can't put this down.
You do it once.
All right. So.
No, I think
Now?
you off.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right. Amen. Okay. Thank you. Anyway, I got a little bit of scripture for you guys. So I'd share. I like what Greg had to say. A lot of good stuff there, man. A lot of just, dude, you're spot on. The stuff that I got to share tonight is right along the same lines, because the step 12 was about sharing, going out and continuing to share the message with others. So what I want to do is I want to give you some examples of people going out and sharing the message, Most of the Bible is written by people that just were sharing their story or continuing on. Like the whole New Testament, there's so much stuff where Paul's just sharing what's going on in his life, And God did some crazy, amazing things in Paul's life. He took a guy that was killing people, going around getting the kids Christians and taking them back to the Jews so that they could kill them because they believed in Jesus. And God changed that guy and turned that guy into one of the number one Christian attracting people. One of the number one preachers of all time. You know what I mean? That's amazing. That's big stuff.
Amen.
So, I want to give you a little bit of what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share the context of what's going on in where I'm reading from, and then I'll read some scriptures out of that just for time's sake, But I'll share with you what chapters that is in case anybody wants to go back and read it later. Okay? So my first example I want to give is in Galatians, the first chapter of Galatians. And what's going on is Paul is writing to the Galatians because these guys, he kind of went and started a church over there and preached about Jesus to them, and these guys got saved, and then they're slowly falling back into legalism. So Paul's writing them a letter to try to help them through this and show them, you can't go back into works. It's not about works. And when you think about Paul writing the Bible, a lot of times, I know I always used to think that Paul was like some old dude, just writing the Bible from, prison cell most of the time. But when he wrote this, he was only in his late 40s. He wasn't that old when he's writing this letter over to the Galatians to try to help them. So, my first scripture that I'm going to read out here is Galatians 1:15 through 17. And it says, "But when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb, and called me through his grace, to reveal his Son in me, that I might preach him among the Gentiles, I did not immediately confer with flesh and blood, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me. But I went to Arabia and returned again to Damascus." And then, so that shows, that he was sharing the gospel among the Gentiles. He's just kind of writing these guys, explaining to them, do you remember who I was? Do you remember this is what went on? So he's sharing his testimony of the steps that he took. Then he goes on to talk about going and seeing James and the other apostles. And then in chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "After 14 years, I went up to Jerusalem with Barnabas, and I also took Timothy with me. And I went up by revelation and communicated to them that gospel which I preached among the Gentiles." And the reason I chose this section of the Bible is to show that, he's talking about, and then after 14 years, so he's been doing this for a while, he's not a new Christian. God didn't just change his life. A lot of time went on, and he's still writing, trying to help other people through his testimony. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Did I lose anybody?
Amen.
Amen. So that's my goal, is to show you that God's using Paul still after a bunch of years, After 14 years, he's still using what God did in his life to touch others. And he's still sharing with people. The next little section that I want to share is in Mark, chapter 16, it's going to be verse 15. And just to give you a little feedback on what's going on here, you know, Jesus had just been crucified, resurrected, and he's shown himself to a couple of the women, and he's shown himself to a couple of the disciples, and he's getting ready to ascend to heaven. And these are real things that happened. You know what I mean? The Bible really happened. This ain't some just story. This is real stuff that happened. You gotta believe that. If you don't believe that, then the Bible's not going to do any good for you, you know? So you have to decide you believe this stuff really happened. That was a huge thing for me in my life. So the last thing Jesus says to the disciples, he's never going to see them physically again, you know, on earth. He says, and he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature.
Amen.
That had to have been super important. The most important thing for that to be his parting words. You know? The last example I want to use, though, is in Mark. This is chapter 5. I really recommend people read this. Go back and read Mark chapter 5 and you can get the whole story. What's going on here is there's this guy living in these tombs. He can't even be in town anymore because he's so messed up. It says he's demon possessed. The guy's outside of town, living by graves, you know. It says that the guy, they'd chained this guy up. They tried to bind him because he was just such a menace. Nobody wanted him around. They were locking this guy up and the chains wouldn't even hold him. The guy was cutting himself. Just tearing himself up. Miserable. You know what I mean? Anybody been there?
Oh, yeah.
I've been chained up.
Once, twice.
I've been miserable. I used to cut myself. All kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah, getting locked up for it too.
For sure. So Jesus sees this guy, and you know, the guy has all these demons in him. The demon's name were Legion, which meant we are many. So Jesus cast those demons out of that guy, sent him into a herd of pigs. You know? Changed the guy's life right there. You know? Healed him. Made him whole. So I want to read chapter 5, verse 18. It says, and when he got into the boat, he who had been demon-possessed begged him that he might be with him. However, Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he has had compassion on you.
That's right.
Woo! You know, that guy wasn't clean for months. You know? That guy didn't have years of training. That guy didn't have Paul's 14 years later. You know what I mean? That guy had 10 minutes. You know, however long it was before Jesus bounced from there to go with other people. And Jesus told him, go home and tell your friends what God's done for you. You ain't got to have a grip of clean time. You ain't got to, you know, be all that. If you think that you can't help anybody, if you're one day sober, you got one more day sober than that other guy.
Woo! Right.
You know? If you're new here, you're not here by accident. Jesus is working in your life, whether you know it or not.
That's right.
You know? Even if it's just to say, I've been clean today, Lord. Or to tell someone, you know, I don't know much, but I know I went to this meeting and there was a bunch of clean people there that was helping us. I don't know much, but I know Jesus loves me.
That's right.
That's a lot.
You know? You can change lives by sharing that and by going on and sharing the message to others, by keeping it going. Not only do you share and change their life, but it changes your life.
Amen.
You know? It's amazing. I can get up here and just talk. Someone will listen to what God's done in my life.
Right?
It blows me away. You know? And that means so much to me. It keeps me clean. You know? God blesses me from me just being able to talk to you guys or other people. You know? So carrying that message is super vital. And if you have the power, think about it. If you've been clean even one day, you got the power to be clean one day. If you have that power, Jesus is that power. You could change someone's life forever. You know? They're locked up. They're in that prison. They're stuck. And you have the key to change that, to open that door. Why wouldn't you want to share it? You know?
Come on.
Jesus changed my life. I was going to be in prison forever. Believed it with my whole heart. Ever. And I didn't do not one thing. Not one thing. I didn't write no one. I didn't ask no one nothing. I didn't try to do anything to get time reduced. All of a sudden I got letters and that I'm going home. You know what I mean? That Jesus did that. If you can do that for someone by sharing the word with them, that's a beautiful thing. You think Paul the Apostle knew that what he was writing, that letter he was writing, was going to change millions of lives for thousands of years? You know? He probably just thought he was writing a letter. You know? But his letter saved my life. Whatever God's done in your life today, whether it's something super small, whether it's something super big, tell someone about it. If you're here today for the first time, Jesus loves you, and Jesus wants to change your life.